We are getting towards the end of our training course here, but this section is going to be the top 15 frequently asked questions that I get in new client consults because I've had hundreds of them, and most of you ask almost the exact same questions. And so I wanted to go ahead and just answer them all here because chances are you have many of these same questions. And so, if you do end up deciding to move forward at any point, whether it's now or a year from now with us, you will at least have this background information, and then you won't have these burning questions that you need to ask live in our consult. And that just means that we can spend more of the consult with less background information and more learning about you and what's appropriate for you. Okay, so let's just go ahead and dive in. 15 facts. Question 1. How many sessions do I need for this to work before I see significant alleviation of symptoms? And you know what I'm going to do actually in this? I am going to share my screen because I don't always do this, but I want to share this because I feel like it would be helpful for you all to follow along with me, right? Okay, so this is question 1. How many sessions do I need for this to work? I don't want you all reading ahead, so I'm going to do this. Okay, so this really depends on you. We've gone over this, right, in some of the prior sections. The goal that I have for everyone is a one and done, right? It's no more than an annual tune-up maybe type of cadence if you want to. If you really fully embrace and participate in this session and you're properly prepared and ready, and if you're not on a lot of significant medications that would hinder your serotonin sensitivity and thus your experience, you're virtually guaranteed to have an intensely transformational experience, right? Now, sometimes people, as we discussed with treatment-resistant depression in particular, can have kind of like a sluggish response to psilocybin therapy, and that's because their nervous system is so shut down and has been for so many years, it can just take a while to kind of re-spark it. So for some of these people, I might recommend up to 3 sessions spaced out, but we certainly can play this by ear, right? Like you don't need to pay for or commit to this up front. And for our return clients, it's very common to come in and address something different each time. So you come in not because the first session didn't work, but because the second session you want to talk about or have a theme of something different. So that's Q1. Q2, how long do I need to be in Portland? Well, if you're driving, say down from Seattle, you can just drive down the evening before and you could leave the next morning or afternoon. So for example, you drive down on a Thursday evening, you drive back Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon. If you're flying, we recommend that you stay 1 extra day in Portland so as not to have to deal with like the airport stress and traffic that next day. So for the same example of a Friday session, you can fly in Thursday afternoon, get settled in your hotel or wherever, stay Saturday, and then fly out Sunday morning. We also offer weekday administration sessions, which generally have cheaper airfare, right? And so, yeah, if you, for example, came in on Tuesday, you could fly on Monday and you could fly out Thursday. So that would be like a midweek session. And then finally, we have lodging recommendations that are near our center. We've got like at least 10 or 15 places that are hotels and Airbnbs that are really within like a 5 to 10 minute walk or drive. And one of them is as low as $45 a night. So we definitely send this resource to you as part of your new client onboarding. Okay, number 3, I'm scared of the bad trip. Can you guarantee that I won't have a bad trip? What can we do to reduce the risk of this happening? So fear of the bad trip is literally the number one concern that I get. Most people define a bad trip as one that devolves into paranoia, extreme fear, or where reality just completely dissolves away, right? So let me explain what we do to minimize the risk of having a bad trip. And this has been covered in prior sections as well. Number 1, dosing, dosing, dosing. Bad trips are strongly correlated with very high doses. And what constitutes a very high dose, right? It varies greatly between people. So a high dose for one person is not a high dose for another person. And that is why we take dosing so seriously at Fractal. So you might be encouraged to split your dose up into like an initial dose that's more conservative, and then an optional booster dose that you take only, part or all of it, only if you feel like you need it. And this really safeguards against inadvertently taking too much in the initial dose. Second, is preparation and readiness, right? People who feel emotionally ready and have a clear intention, they generally do very, very well in the session. It's when people are like resistant to the experience or they have just nothing to focus on, they tend to have an increased risk of having their mind kind of go into like darker or just random places. So if this starts to happen, you can lean on your facilitator, of course, to help redirect you, to remind you of your goals, to support you. And this just helps kind of like redirect things into a more useful place to continue the journey. Bad trips happen out in the wild because people take too much of a dose. They are in a party environment that becomes overwhelming. There are other substances involved, usually alcohol or cannabis. And these are considered adulterants to psilocybin. They increase psilocybin's effects. And then they end up feeling unsafe in their environment, right? So none of these elements are really factors in a professional, safe environment. Okay, what about serotonin syndrome? This is where I'm going to cover this. I get so many questions about this. Many studies have shown that classic psychedelics do not cause or contribute to serotonin syndrome, including when they're combined with popular SSRI or SNRI medications. So I want to just summarize one of these studies. I'm just going to read it right here, and I will include a link to this so that you can read it yourself if you want to. Psilocybin and psilocin lack clinically significant inhibitor activity at monoamine reuptake pumps, such as SERT or VMAT2, thus do not result in substantially increased intrasynaptic serotonin. Due to minimal intrasynaptic serotonin release, psilocybin's mechanism of action is unlikely, even in high doses, to result in serotonin toxicity. Okay, so you may notice that the above quote includes a reference to inhibitor activity at monoamine reuptake pumps. The one medication class for which serotonin syndrome is a potential concern while taking psilocybin are MAOI antidepressant medications. MAOI stands for monoamine oxidase inhibitor. They are an older class of antidepressant that's not used much anymore, although I heard that there were some new variations of it that they're saying like, it's not the old MAOI, it's a new MAOI. Anyways, they are still around. As you might guess, MAOI meds work specifically by increasing inhibition of monoamine oxidase. Monoamine oxidase is the enzyme that breaks down serotonin. So if you inhibit this enzyme, it prevents a breakdown of serotonin in the brain, and it leads to abnormally high serotonin levels. So when you combine this with other medications or substances that also increase serotonin, this is what can lead to serotonin syndrome, which is a buildup of excess serotonin. Clients who are on MAOI medications are very sensitive to other serotonergic substances, and they will obviously be very sensitive to psilocybin as well. We have successfully administered psilocybin to several clients who are on MAOI medications by just adjusting their psilocybin dose down, sometimes way down, right? Like sometimes as much as half, with a potential backup booster dose on hand only if they need to. So I do have another link to a video from a well-known pharmacist regarding serotonin syndrome, but I just wanted to address this, that the way that SSRI and SNRI and even SARI medications work is not the same way as how MAOI medications work, and they are not, they do not pose a risk for serotonin syndrome when combined with psilocybin. Okay. Question 5, what about HPPD, hallucinogenic perception persisting disorder? So this is a condition in which visual distortions will persist past a psychedelic session. It is very rare. It happens roughly in about 1 to 2% of all cases. I'm not saying our cases, I'm saying worldwide self-reported user cases. It happens primarily when people mix substances, in particular cannabis, at the same time as taking psilocybin. And it's also correlated with very heavy doses and very repeated doses of hallucinogenic substances. So I've actually never heard of a case of HPPD happening in the legal framework of psilocybin therapy here in Oregon, and we've served over 10,000 clients collectively in our state. It hasn't happened in my center at all. To reduce the risk of HPPD, we recommend using psychedelics only as they're needed, right? We've talked about this, usually 1 to 3 sessions spread apart, and never ever combine psychedelics with other substances immediately before or after your session. In particular, we strongly advise our clients not to go home and smoke or eat cannabis products the evening after their psychedelic session, right? So by eliminating these risk factors, we generally can minimize the risk of HPPD occurrences. All right, next one. My brother, dad, mom, etc. has psychosis, borderline, bipolar, etc. That is a contraindication. Does that disqualify me too? The simple answer is no. We do not consider family history of medical or psychiatric diagnoses. Personal history is the only thing that matters. So it is crucial that you are open and honest about past symptoms that you have had in these areas, whether you have been officially diagnosed or not. This is a good one. Question 7. I have struggled with addiction in the past, and I'm concerned that doing psilocybin will make me fall off the bandwagon or lead to addiction. Can I become addicted to psilocybin? Will it cause a relapse to other substances? The answer to the first question is no. It is not possible to become physically addicted to psilocybin. As I've said before, psilocybin lacks dopamine-mediated reinforcement, and there's no evidence supporting potential for habituation or addiction, despite development of rapid tolerance with repeated administration. Of course, it's possible for people to use psilocybin to escape their real world, of course, right? And this is possible for any mind-altering substance. However, the usage of psilocybin tends to make people want to feel their feelings. It makes them want to deal with problems. It makes them want to take care of themselves. This is why psilocybin is so effective at treating other addictions, right, of more harmful substances. And so somebody who is actively trying to avoid those things is not going to get it with psilocybin. Psilocybin is going to be knocking on their door, telling them to go deal with their problems. So it's important to establish the right relationship for psilocybin is what I always tell people. If you have struggled with addiction in the past, right, you are under no obligation to see psilocybin as an illicit drug just because our culture and Richard Nixon decided 50 years ago that it was. That is a societal narrative. You are welcome to see it and to reframe it as an alternative to pharmaceutical medications, some of which are very harmful, actually, legal but harmful. So you can see it as an alternative medicine that's natural and it's made by the planet, right? And it has really grown up with humanity throughout all of our history. There's a strong possibility that your ancestors used psilocybin regardless of your heritage or where you grew up. So for someone who is just struggling with addiction of a different drug and is concerned about that, I really encourage you to spend time on your own or in preparation with your facilitator, going through, like, examining those societal narratives that you've heard and those limiting beliefs that you have, and helping just kind of like reframe it a little bit so that you don't go into this session viewing psilocybin as an illicit drug or an addictive drug. That's really important to not hold those beliefs when you go into your session. So I hope that that's helpful. Question 8, what dose will I need to be effective? Well, the wonderful thing about going through a legal and regulated program is that, number one, the mushrooms you consume are potency tested using very sophisticated equipment with our testing lab. And number two, we have dosing strategies that make your session much more likely to be effective, right? People surprise us all the time with being far more or less sensitive than we thought. I have discussed this in the dosing section, and your facilitator is going to help you fine-tune your own personalized dosing strategy. But in general, our dosing recommendations follow pretty typical buckets, right? And I have these listed here: 1 to 2 milligrams for a microdose, 4 to 10 milligrams for an introductory sort of, we call it the meet the medicine dose. That's a training wheel dose. 12 to 16 milligrams, maybe for highly sensitive individuals who have experienced violent trauma and they're not on any blunting medications and we feel like they just need a really gentle experience. 20 to 28 milligrams is the general bucket for average individuals not on blunting meds, and certainly you can go towards the upper or lower end of that range depending on your metabolism speed and your overall known sensitivity in general. And then the next one up, the 30 to 40 milligram bucket, is for highly tolerant or low sensitivity individuals who are on blunting meds. And then we reserve that top bucket, 40 to 50 milligrams, for individuals who are on very heavy doses of psychiatric meds and or another blunting substance like cannabis with heavy, heavy daily use. We're not talking about even light daily use. We're talking about people who are on very heavy doses. And the 40 to 50 milligrams also is usually reserved for people who have more than one of those factors. So they might be on an SSRI for 20 years and a heavy daily cannabis user, for example. So those are the general buckets that we use. This has become tried and true over almost 500 clients, and we really have a lot of success with it. Can you give me advice, guidance on doing this myself? I have a friend who's given me mushrooms. No, I cannot. And I don't recommend the DIY approach for many reasons that I've already discussed here, not just for legality purposes, but also because, higher doses of mushrooms can be dangerous when done alone. And I know this because I've experienced it myself. So I'm not just talking theoretically here. I have experienced it and it was very scary. And I know other people who have experienced it and it was very scary. And I've seen clients who have experienced it at our center who it would have been very scary if they weren't with someone, right? So this does happen. So I know your friend will probably tell you it's fine, it's safe, but like as a professional who's seen 500 people and has gone through it myself, I can tell you that it does happen, right? So again, I don't mean to harp on this, but you really have no idea how potent your mushrooms are if you're just getting them from a friend, right? And if you got them secondhand, then, it's possible you don't even know where they came from or how they were grown. And so going this route it's your choice, of course. Everybody is in charge of their own choices in life, but this can really be dangerous to you. You're inserting risk. And so I just have to strongly urge you not to consume secondhand psychoactive substances just because it's cheaper. The worst thing that can possibly happen to you is literally having a psychotic break while you're alone and you don't have any support. So please reconsider spending the appropriate amount of investment to do this legally and safely in the hands of experienced professionals. And I will add, before I move on to Q10, if you do insist on doing this by yourself, I strongly, strongly urge for your own safety to start low and go slow, meaning don't just out the gate take 5 grams of mushrooms. Do a microdose or something low that is associated with lower risk of actual safety. That I have to say that even though I don't condone illegal use at all, but if you do choose to, for ethical reasons of harm reduction, I really recommend that you not dose yourself alone in high doses. Okay. Moving on, Q10, is there a way to tell whether my current medications will be too blunting to have a successful experience? Yes, there is. And it's called the low dose session. So you come in for an introductory session of around 4 to 8 milligrams is how it works. This is like a half day, right? This is maybe 3 hours. It's more than a microdose, but it doesn't usually cross the consciousness altering threshold. And based on the strength of this response, you and your facilitator can then make a more informed decision as to what your higher dose should be, right, for your higher dose session. So if you want to add in an intro test low dose session to your standard program, it's an additional $500 for that additional service, but it can dramatically increase the effectiveness of your higher sort of main event session, right? So for example, we've had clients come in and feel very little even on 8 milligrams. They didn't even feel it as a microdose level. And so we knew that they were less sensitive than we thought. And then they became a candidate for dosing a full 50 milligrams with their higher dose, but we wouldn't have guessed that if they didn't have their introductory test dose. So just know that that's available to you if you would like. How far are you booking? We are one of the larger centers in Oregon, but we do protect against getting so large that we lose the personal touch. Relationships are so important to me, and I love getting to know our clients personally. We have 5 one-on-one administration rooms in our center and an additional lounge area that can act as a 6th room. Even though we have 6 rooms available, I try not to book any more than 3 or maybe 4 clients in any given day. And we're open 5 days a week, right? Although we sometimes reduce this to 3 or 4 days a week over the winter or just based on demand. But if you do the math on this, right, we're capable of seeing 80 or more clients in a month. And we also have 10 to 12 facilitators who are on our staff who regularly work with between 4 and 8 clients per month. So they also limit their client load to ensure that each client feels a high personal connection and just like that white glove service. But there's many wonderful facilitators in Oregon. Obviously, we can't add to our team. Well, sorry, we can add to our team at any time if we got too busy. So all this to say, we really can accommodate local or regional requests in as short as 1 week. And we also can book out up to 6 months in advance. You might want to do that because it guarantees your choice of room, it guarantees your choice of facilitator, and it also protects against any pricing increase that we might have to do. So the average time, though, that a client books out is about a month, anywhere from like 3 weeks to 6 weeks is kind of the standard. And this gives them a couple weeks of preparation time and getting to know their facilitator and going through our resources, and then as well as just time to like make travel plans, especially if they're coming from out of state. What makes us different from other service centers in Oregon and Colorado? Well, I'm glad you asked. All service centers are the same in the sense that they follow the same regulatory rules, right? But that's kind of where the similarities end. Each company has its own distinct culture, and I know them all. I know all the other owners in the state. We're kind of a tight-knit community mostly. Some centers in Oregon have an emphasis on kind of having a good time, and that's not a shame on them. That's just more of a like, that's what they want to do, and that's their business model. They have less emphasis on serious topics or healing, right? And some also, unfortunately, do not go through as rigorous of safety screening procedures. Some of them are really good in terms of like their facilitators and stuff, but they just don't have as comfortable of rooms for furniture for laying on for 6 hours. Our rooms are amazing. I put a lot of investment and time and thought into our rooms, and so clients like regularly like don't even want to leave their rooms. They love them so much. All of the centers also have different strains of mushrooms and dosing protocols, right? So a lot of them will have you eating whole dry mushrooms, or they're gonna want you to like grind up mushrooms. They'll sell it to you whole, but then want you to grind it up or whatever. So everyone just kind of does things a little bit differently, right? But like our Google reviews, you can go read on our site, and our other client feedback, they show clearly that our clients are just thrilled with our level of service. And that includes a wealth of educational resources. We have holistic health guidelines. We have nutrition support even. We have gone to a degree of client service and client resources that other centers just haven't invested in. This training is another example. I don't know any service center that is out there doing actual psychedelic education, right? And creating these scripts and doing all this research. Like, we really care about client education and being leaders in this industry. So that is definitely something that sets us apart. Our prices is comparable. We're not the cheapest and we're not the most expensive, right? So we're kind of middle of the road. But just in terms of like the safety, service level, and the resources, I would think we are the number one value in the state, right? Because we aim for a magical, transformative, but still safe, science-backed professional experience for every single client. And all of our facilitators use the same protocol for preparation and integration. So this is important to note, because this leads to consistency of the client experience when you buy a package through Fractal Health. Other centers, they don't create branded standards. They basically just kind of like rent out rooms, and then the facilitators are given practice privileges there. And so, every facilitator is sort of like on their own, having their own company, if you will, in terms of developing client resources and support, and having different pricing and having different, levels of service. So we just operate a little bit differently. I also want to note that pricing is not really indicative of quality or experience, in particular with facilitators. I know firsthand of a few different facilitators in this state who charge double what everybody else does. And it's not because they're twice as good. It's because they want to work half as much, right? So they're not any more better or more skilled. They've just randomly set their pricing in the thousands and thousands of dollars because, they will find someone who will pay that, and then they only have to serve 2 people for the whole month or whatever. And like, that's fine. But I just want you to be aware that, if someone's really, really cheap, then yeah, that probably means that they've cut corners and you get what you pay for. But if someone's really, really expensive, it doesn't necessarily mean that this person is that much better than kind of the industry standard going rate. So just something to be aware of. All right, getting here close to the end. Can my partner friend be in the room with me? Well, it's legally possible as of 2025 with the new Oregon rules, but we generally advise against it. And let me tell you why. Firstly, the person that's in the room is supposed to act like a support person, but they have to adhere to all the same rules that the client does. And this can feel like a challenge sometimes, especially around like supportive touch restrictions. And especially if it's like a romantic partner, right? They might want to give you long hugs or like touch you in areas that are not within the regulatory framework. And what I mean by that, I'll be very specific because I don't mean to get like super creepy. Supportive touch is limited to shoulders, hands, or feet, or a brief supportive hug for facilitators. If you have a support person in the room, it doesn't matter if it's your husband or wife, or partner. They have to act in the same way, ethical standard wise, that a facilitator does. And that can be kind of like hard for them to do, especially if they see you going through a hard time, right? It can be hard to hold themselves back. And then the second thing is having another person in the room, like even someone that you love and trust. It can be pretty distracting, or it can lead to like self-consciousness if you, if you're focused on them too much. And this can reduce the effectiveness of your actual session. You could be worried about how they're feeling watching you, or you may not want to upset them. You might feel weird crying in front of them all of a sudden. So like, and then what happens if some emotion comes up related to them that you want to process, but you feel like you just can't with them in the room, right? There's just all kinds of like emotional and kind of energetic complications. And so usually it's best for someone to just have their own pure private space to do the work they need. And your professional facilitator is there, obviously, as your guide. They know and they expect you to fall apart, right? Like that's just part and parcel of like, if you need to do the work you need to do, they're here for it, right? And in my opinion, they're really the only support that you need. But having said that, sometimes having a supportive, loving partner or friend is wonderful to have just like on site in our lounge. They could have a visitor pass for the day and you just know that they're there, or they can come in right after your, administration session and you receive that support like immediately after. So those are all options for partners or friends to be involved without like being in the space with you. Okay, last two. I'm not into woo or spirituality. Can I do this in a more practical science space? Of course you can. Of course you can. This is a client-led process, right? I myself am agnostic, and we see many rational and skeptic and science-based clients at our center. All of our facilitators meet clients where they're at, right? Not where the facilitator's personal beliefs are. And so we are able to design the experience to honor any client preferences, which kind of leads to the next question. I have spiritual or religious beliefs. Is this going to honor those beliefs? Is this going to change my beliefs? I'm not interested in changing those, right? So you are welcome, of course, to bring whatever beliefs are important to you, whether it's a Christian cross or a Wiccan crystal or anything in between. Psilocybin does not change your fundamental beliefs because it acts as a non-specific mental amplifier. So we have had, for example, many Christians come in and have an experience where they saw Jesus. And we've also had many spiritual people come in and have a sense of a presence of like spirits or ancestors in the room. And interestingly, we've had some atheists sense some spirits as well. So that's interesting. But regardless of what you experience, just realize that this is temporary, and that after the experience, you can choose to incorporate or not incorporate any of your in-session experiences into your daily life or belief system. You are in control of this process. Psilocybin does not force any beliefs on you. Everything that psilocybin brings up is something that was already in your mind. It doesn't introduce brand new thoughts. Okay. Oh, I guess there's a bonus. I said it was 15. I lied. Okay, tell me about the day of process. All right, you are going to arrive at the center between 9 and 9:30 in the morning, and you are welcome to bring your own supplies like a favorite blanket or pillow, eye mask, personal effects, and packaged or whole food like fruit. You can't bring anything homemade. We also have a lot of supplies on site for client use. We've got eye masks, we have blankets, pillows, we have lots of snacks and drinks. You will be consuming your psilocybin dose as a very finely ground mushroom powder. It's so fine and fluffy. It's almost like paprika or something, or flour almost. It's very, very fine. You're going to stir that into a hot drink like tea or cocoa around 10 a.m. And then just depending on your metabolism speed and your sensitivity, your session's going to last usually 5 to 6 hours. Clients usually leave around 4 p.m., but they're welcome to stay till 5. And sometimes clients are just out sooner, and like that's okay, if you have a fast metabolism or you took a little bit of a lower dose. So we will stay open late for any client who is unsafe to leave by 5 p.m., but needing 7 or more hours for a journey is really, really rare. And so if you're done with your journey and you're just kind of like hanging out, talking with your facilitator, we'll probably come around 4:45 and be like, okay, it's time to wrap up, but we also just make sure that people are physically safe to leave the center, and that they're just kind of like hanging out and talking and like doing some initial integration, which is totally fine. Okay, so that's it for the 15/16 questions. I hope this has been helpful.